Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Road Divinity. I'm your host, Lisa Wade, and today I am stoked to have a chance to talk to Hillary Marotta. Hi, Hillary.
Hi. I love your enthusiasm and your radio voice. It's so fantastic.
Thank you. Hillary is not only dear friend, and we were talking recently, like 17 years ago, we met
Uh-huh.
together, and we'll get into all of that, but she's also best-selling author of this beautiful, wonderful little book, Head and Heart: How to Run a Smart and Compassionate Nonprofit. So important, especially in today's world. I mean, when the crap's hitting the fan, it's more important than ever that public service and organizations that are meant to help others are running
Mm-hmm.
a smart,
Yep.
effective, you know, sustainable sort of way.
Yep. Yep.
But you are so much more than just this book. You've got another book in the works that you are currently working on right now, all
I
about
am. I
handbells.
am. I'm super excited about it. It's a complete and total change from the first book. But it's also something that I'm passionate about, something that probably gives me the most joy. It's all about my journey through handbells and being a musician and how that's changed my life, particularly ringing handbells, and what good it's done for me and what any sort of passion in your life can give you.
I love it. Thank you. And I'm so excited you decided to jump in for book number 2. And on this topic, when I talk about you a lot in the book that I wrote. Turns out
Oops.
Hillary is through my book. So if you haven't read it, go read it, and you'll
For
get
sure.
much more
For
about Hillary
sure.
too. But one of the things that you inspired me enormously in the time that we met, you know, way back in the day. We're talking, what, 2003, I
Yeah.
think, at
Yeah.
the Literacy Council of Northern Virginia. And
Mm-hmm.
I was public affairs director there, and you taught English as a second language to people who weren't even literate in their native language.
Some of them, yep. Mm-hmm.
That's a big challenge. That
It was a big challenge. It was a huge challenge. Um, Especially right out of college when I had studied business and I had studied Spanish as well, but as we preached at the time and we still try to now, we don't subscribe to the idea that it's great to speak Spanish in the class because you have students of multiple languages and ethnic backgrounds.
Mhm.
So it's really an art to teach English as a second language, but I loved it. It was great.
Well, I loved the chance to meet you, and your personality and enthusiasm and your care for other people were infectious and just kind of drew me. And I'm like, I want to be friends with her.
That's so
I be friends with
sweet.
her. But it was in interviewing you for the book that I learned where you got your interest in public service, and from college and
Hmm.
mission trip to Nicaragua. Would you be
Yep.
willing to talk with us a little bit about that?
Oh,
How
absolutely.
it
I get so lit up about that. I can talk about that anytime, any
Yeah.
place. I I kind of tell the story from the very beginning that I went to church in college. I went to our interdenominational chapel on campus every Sunday, and one Sunday early in my junior year, of October of my junior year, we were sitting in chapel service and we had some guest speakers from Nicaragua. And I didn't know all the details at the time, but I'm sitting there and I'm listening to them telling stories of the recovery from Hurricane Mitch because that's where they were at the time, which had devastated millions and millions of people, wiped out parts of Nicaragua. They were doing relief work there. And all of a sudden, this voice said, this was the first time in my life this had ever happened. This voice said, "You're going there." And I looked over my shoulder as I was sitting in chapel and I was like, who said that? And this
Part of
voice
me.
just kept saying, "You're going." And I said, "What do you mean I'm going to a third world country? I just got used to living 90 minutes from home in my first world country. at a very comfy liberal arts college. You not tell, I'm not going to no third world country. But God said, yeah, you are.
Mm.
And I found myself fundraising and getting ready for this trip and sharing it with friends and family. And, all of a sudden I was getting travel shots to go somewhere, that I had never considered going. And I had to protect myself from, yellow fever. And I was taking medicine to prevent malaria. And we were packing suitcases. And it was just very surreal. And when we got down there, um, we saw the settlement where the government had put about 100,000 refugees from Hurricane Mitch. They had lived along the shorelines of the lake, and the lake had flooded. And so the government had put them in this bright, sunny, no shade field, used to be a cow pasture, an animal pasture, and gave them each family a small plot and a black tarp with which to make some sort of housing or shelter. Now, again, we're talking about Nicaragua. So Nicaragua is near the equator. We're talking about Central America. It's hot there. And the government gave them a black tarp. So this was in the very beginning, only a couple of years after Hurricane Mitch, and things were not great. There was not running water. There was not electricity. These people were making the best of it. And we were, the group that I was with had done things like dig latrines, catering to the most absolutely necessary needs of the people who were living there, including helping to build cinder block houses and things like that. When I came, we were in the midst of seeing people at a medical clinic that had been temporarily set up. And so I was able to interpret at the medical clinic and check patients in. And then we were also building walls to go around a compound where we were going to assist in building a permanent medical clinic. And when I say building walls, it's kind of an interesting thing because here in the States, you think about what it takes to build a wall, and you think about things like pouring footers and concrete and all that kind of thing. And clearly, in the middle of a field in Nicaragua, we didn't have that kind of equipment. So there were several of us working alongside a handful of Nicaraguan women, and our job was to mix the cement by hand. So you'd pour a bag of concrete down, pour water in it, and it was just a process of mixing and mixing these heavy, heavy shovelfuls of concrete until this was all mixed together and could be poured somewhere. And it was a completely transformative experience. I ended up going back the following year. By that time, this first building of the permanent medical clinic was finished, and our university had such to do with it that our university president came down and did a dedication, and I actually spoke on behalf of the university, and it was amazing to see the transformation. Unfortunately, I haven't been back since then. That was 2001. I've been wanting to go back. Things have changed significantly. I keep in touch with the organization there. I even host them sometimes when they come to do a speaking tour. And so I've kept up on how things have changed. And I know that if I would go now, I wouldn't even begin to recognize it. But what was interesting about it was not a religious trip. It was not a mission trip, so to speak. It was a service trip. So we had students and faculty and staff of all races, religions, any kind of diversity you could think of, because this was not, a sanctioned interdenominational church trip, or Jewish or Catholic or anything. It was just a service trip. So we were providing service in a secular way, but to me, it became much more than that. God was the one that told me to go there in the first place. So it was a much more spiritually minded experience for me than it may have been for someone else on the trip. And like I said, I ended up going back. It was extremely transformative in what I ended up doing for a career. I came home from there being a business major and saying, okay, well, I still want to be a business major, but I don't want to do what all of my classmates are going to do. They're going to these big corporate interviews and these finance jobs. And none of that's for me. So what am I going to do?
Mm. Now you had a family background in like big business, but I mean, you want to talk a little bit about the inspiration there that
I do a little bit. My grandfather, who passed several years ago, was the retired CEO and board president of the first, what was then Hershey Foods Corporation, which is now the Hershey Company.
Mhm.
And so I grew up with him as a leader, as a businessman, as a tremendous role model for me. I've never seen a more hardworking person in all of my life.
Mm.
I've never seen another person with his morals and values. And he was really my inspiration. And when I first went into business in college, he was kind of where I thought I would try to go. I believed that if I wanted to run some company someday, I could. And so I kind of thought, well, I'll work my way up in some business and do something business related like he did. And I came home from Nicaragua and I said, I can't do that.
Mhm.
I said, I can't. And he and I had several conversations about it. And he kept saying, Hillary, corporations do good things. You can do good things in a corporation. You can help people. And I just kept thinking, that's not where I need to help. I need to help at the ground level. I need to be in direct service to someone or something. And so I know my grandfather, in his way, rolled his eyes a little bit and probably pushed up his glasses and thought, oh dear, I guess she'll just go and do this for a little while and then maybe find something. But I went into the nonprofit sector and it stuck.
Mhm.
And so there's always been a little bit of a balance and a little bit of a juxtaposition. There's part of me that believes in all those business values and ethics. And um, I saw him run a successful company. And then there's part of me that it caters to the nonprofit world. And one of the things that brought my book into fruition was marrying the two, because I had enough business background to see that after I went out into the nonprofit world, some are run really well and some are run just really not so well.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it and I was like, why are we not applying business principles to this sector? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, they're still businesses. Granted, there's a lot to take into consideration. There's the service and there's the compassion, and these things are usually come out of someone's passion for something and wanting to help and solve a problem. But there's still no reason that they can't be run like businesses in certain ways. And so that was the premise of the book, which has now led me to consult with some small nonprofits and things like that. So all of that really came from those two service trips in college, for which I am forever grateful. I'm completely changed by them.
I love that. When the work that you're doing on behalf of others and the transformation that you can see for others is mirrored back to transformation
Mm-hmm.
in your own life, within your own passion, sense of purpose, future direction, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like, one of the things that, as we've talked in the past, it feels like that service ethic or that desire to be of benefit in some way to others has really
Mm-hmm.
is kind of part of the foundational element of your spiritual pursuit too. It's like the two. It feels like they've kind of married in the conversations that we've had.
They really have. I mean, I grew up in the United Methodist tradition, and I just took it as church. It was just what church was. And honestly, it wasn't until I was much further along in my adulthood that I looked at what, sect I had grown up in, and I was like, oh, that's what this is actually about. Well, that actually, maybe I'm in the right place, because that's, Methodism is about serving and that all of those kinds of things. Now, I was like, oh, it actually does match. Um, but I can't say that it was specifically that
Mhm.
led me down that path. It certainly helped. I mean, I was involved in church from a very young age, and I was just taught that that's what you do. You go to church. But even though some of my morals and values came from there, I think it was also just an innate sense of who I am as a person. I don't think I could separate myself from the idea that I just think we're here to help each other. Um, because we're just all here together. And so if we can't help each other through whatever's going on, what's the point at the end of the day? We can't take anything with us. So, if I have something, or if I have an experience that can help someone else, why would I keep that to myself?
Mhm.
Why wouldn't I make something easier for somebody else?
Mm, I love that. And it kind of reminds me of a conversation we had several years ago. We were actually coaching together as I was putting together my book, and one of the exercises we were doing was listing out all the roles you play in your.
Hmm.
So just all the roles, lots of roles. There were many.
Yep.
There were many.
Yep.
Like I'm like, okay, we need to get down to like 10. But yeah, like
And I
17.
think I had filled 2 legal pad pages or something. I don't.
And as we looked through it and we read through it, there was kind of this feeling, it's kind of
Yeah.
And what we realized is that there weren't really any roles in there that were about you feeding your soul. It was a lot of it
Yeah.
was about you serving other people,
Hmm.
which is a beautiful, wonderful thing. And yet, not there was nothing there in terms of putting priority on and what brings you joy
Yeah.
beyond other
Yeah.
people. And then you added one thing. And that's made such a huge difference. You want to talk about that? I look back at that and I'm like, yes, that was a moment.
We, yeah, I mean, you had asked me to make this list, and I made this list diligently, and I was, thinking about all the things that I do on a daily basis, and what roles that means I'm in. Um, and something came up. I think it was on my original list. I'm not sure, but I think at some point I did put musician on there, but I hadn't given it much weight or anything. I hadn't really thought about it. It was just kind of like, well, I used to play my flute, I used to play handbells, and I do like music, and so that's on there. And you're the one who brought that out, and you were like, "No, what was that?" And I was like, "Well, I play handbells and all this." And she's like, or you were like, well, then you're a musician. Like, that's one of your roles. And I was like, but I'm not playing right now. So what does that have to do with it? You're like, okay, but when we just said that, you kind of like lit up. And I was like, oh, I did. Huh.
You did.
Um, and the more we talked, the more it dawned on me that this was something that I had sort of neglected, but that I really missed in my life.
Mm.
And so you were so encouraging, and you were so like excited for me, and you were just like, you got to do something, you got to put that back in your life, like you have to find it, you have to. And I was like, what? I don't got time for this. Like, I got 2 kids, like I don't even know what we're talking about here. And then I said, well, I'm trying to think. I said, because I think it was after that. Yeah. I said, well, I did just attend this really cool bell thing in October, and that was really awesome. I got to go to North Carolina and play in this mass ring situation where it's hundreds of people coming together and ringing bells for the weekend. And I said, that was really fun. And you're like, you need to do more of that. I'm like, well, okay, yeah, but like, when am I going to fit that in? And then I told you, I was like, well, I did always want to be a conductor. And I was like, it was just one of those things that I thought about, but I did always want. She's like, you got to go. You got to do that. And I'm like,
That was a little bossy.
I was like, all right. So I started making things happen, and then I would call you, and I'd be like, so guess what I'm doing? And you're like, yes. And I would be scared to death to take on private conducting lessons, scared to death to take on, new and different bell experiences. And you would just be like, yes, that's what you got to do. You can do this. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, can I? But overall, that made the biggest difference
Mm.
in my life to this point. I mean, I have focused on bringing some of that back, and it's just made a huge, huge difference.
It's been so fun to watch and have the conversations where it was clear that the steps you were getting ready to take were so far outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
A million reasons and a million, just excuses.
Yep.
Some of them very good. I mean, you're a busy person, but there were so many things that could have prevented you from
Yeah.
taking that step. And it's been
Hmm.
so fun to watch your comfort zone go from here to like, I mean, it's just like you've jumped over it. And every time you jump over a comfort zone, whether it's, pursuing handbells and conducting or writing your first book and now your second or whatever, it's just like your light shines that much brighter. And just the enthusiasm that you bring to the world, it's as your friend, it's been incredibly cool to watch. I thank
Thank you. That's super sweet. Because believe me, there are days where I'm in my sweats and I'm like, there's no light over here. I'm
you
not
under
shining light on anything right now.
this that kind of raises another topic. I have so admired the work that you've done in the world of mental health, and both from being a mental health first aid trainer to the work
Mhm.
you've done with nonprofits that focus on mental health concerns, and really trying to reduce the stigma around talking
For
about
sure.
asking for
Yep.
help. Do you mind just sharing, in terms of any message that you might have for that, or why that's important to you? Just kind of your why around that work.
My why around that is all personal experience.
Mm,
I grew up a very high overachiever. And after some years into my adulthood, looking back, some of that was definitely anxiety, fell into the anxiety category, although I didn't know it at the time. And when I went off to college, my first semester, I got so homesick that I fell into a depression,
mm,
and had to work my way out of that. And of course, that's not for most people. It's not something that goes away completely for the rest of your life. It can be very episodical, and it can be a once and done thing. But for me, it was not. And so it's come up repeatedly, as well as anxiety has come up repeatedly throughout my adult life. And it's something I deal with all the time. And I just didn't I just didn't understand why it was such a taboo subject.
mm.
Like, we talk about physical health, we talk about, all kinds of things. Someone breaks their leg, everybody brings a casserole. I mean, your arm is in a cast, or you get diagnosed with, a type of cancer, and everybody rallies. But when someone's diagnosed with a mental health condition, it's always very hush hush. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to upset the person. No one wants to say, well, I think this person, blah, blah, blah. It's ridiculous. It's just another manifestation of a physical illness. It's researched and documented that these conditions are brain conditions. And
Mhm.
so it's not something a person has control over necessarily. And it's not something that we should be ashamed to get help for either. We wouldn't just, if my child fell off her bike and broke her arm, I wouldn't just say, well, you know, put some ice on it and say your prayers and,
Choose to be
just tough it out and it'll be fine.
yeah.
I, we wouldn't do that. None of us would do that. And so I just feel so strongly that mental health needs to be seen in the very same light. And so I started working with a mental health organization out of Virginia. And while I was doing that, I got trained in mental health first aid. And then I decided, based on our work together, that was another thing I took on. I decided to get trained as a mental health first aid trainer. And so I've been doing that for the past couple of years. And I love that because it brings together my desire, my love for teaching, with getting all this information out about mental health and how we need to reduce the stigma. And it empowers our students, those we're training, to actually have the confidence to approach someone that might be having some sort of mental health crisis, whether it's a substance use crisis or a panic attack or depression, any one of those things, to actually feel comfortable going up to the person and saying, can I help you? How can I help you? What can I do for you? Rather than simply walking away or feeling that I'm not qualified for this or things like that, because we need to bring these issues to the forefront and get comfortable talking about it, because that's the only way they're going to get resolved. Education is the only way to resolve any of our issues.
Mhm.
People are afraid of what's different, and they're afraid of what's different because they don't know. And if we take away that one thing, if we give people the information, um, they're going to know and they're going to feel more comfortable. And so that's been a huge thing of mine. It's very personal to our family as well. I work on my mental health all the time. I go to therapy. I have medication. My daughters are portraying some of the traits that they got from me and some that they got from their dad. And so we always have a very open conversation about it in our house. And last year, my 11-year-old came to me and she said, "Mom, you know how you go and talk to your therapist?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Can I get one of those?" I was like, "Well, sure." I mean, I was a little taken aback, but I was like super proud of her for saying that. Now in her little like fifth grade mind, I'm kind of thinking, "Girl, what you got to talk about?" But I'm sure she does have things to talk about. And the fact that she was able to voice that to me and say, "Can I do that too?" was huge. And I was so proud of her for recognizing that and for saying that. And so we just really try to keep an open dialogue, and we talk about it, and we talk about brain health, and we talk about talking to other people about it and accepting people the way they are. And I just want, at least in my little family culture, that all of that to be okay, so that my kids can go out into the world and spread that message.
I love that. Thank you for sharing all of that and for being willing, to tell your story with that. On the conversation of mental health, is simply how challenging this year in particular has been for so many people, whether it's just the stress. I mean, it's a freaking global pandemic, for
Yeah.
goodness sakes. There's
Yeah.
stress and fear related to
Yep.
that. But then families trying to figure out, okay, schools are learning virtually, and how do
Yep.
I manage all of this? Kids who may or may not get to see their friends are trying to
Yep.
figure out how to learn, in an online environment. My daughter, for example, was quarantined for 2 weeks and couldn't go to swim practice. And I
Yep.
know for her, swimming is really
Mm-hmm.
important to her mental health and her like
Yep.
emotional stability. So what from your experience and what you've seen and just what um, do you have any recommendations or any observations about this weird time?
I mean, the observation is just that this is, all the cliches and everything have already been said. Unprecedented, something we've never seen. It's not normal. All of that kind of thing. It's just not. I mean, we're not meant to live this way. I mean, humans are searching for connection, and so this is terribly, terribly hard on everyone. Um, it's been a struggle personally, for sure. I mean, there are days that I've been up and down in the same day 3 times.
Mhm.
There are times that I've been thankful for the extra time and not having to run the kids around and not having a lot of activities and just relaxing. And then there are moments where I'm going, what am I going to do with the next 3 hours? Um, when I actually don't have the motivation to do anything, which is the other factor. And like you said, then there's our kids, and they've had to adjust so much. The thing about our kids, though, is that they are so resilient. And that's not to lessen the impact or lessen the importance of what we're talking about,
Mhm.
or just be glib about them not necessarily being in school all the time. It's hard. There is no doubt. We've had lots of adjustments here. I mean, we've been going to hybrid school, and now they want to send our kids back full-time elementary, but at the same time the high school just closed because they had cases, and school districts around us are going virtual through Christmas. So it's difficult. It's really difficult. And when you're trying to care for your own mental health and then your children's or someone else's as well, it's quadruply more difficult. um For me, a lot of the coping mechanisms have been um, walking the dog an awful lot. Getting out to
Loves it.
walk the dog, whether I want to or not, forcing the fresh air, forcing the activity, um, still remaining dedicated to a gym routine or some sort of exercise routine. It helps relieve the anxiety and the stress, even though I'd rather stay in bed. Getting the rest, trying to eat healthy, even though obviously right now we want all the sugar that we can have. We want all the comfort foods. We want
All the time.
everything that makes us feel better, all the carbs. Um, and it's going back to what I was saying about mental health. It's just so important to talk to someone.
Mm.
Whether you talk to your spouse or you talk to a friend or you talk to a therapist or you talk to all of them,
Mhm.
it's just so important because it's how we process our feelings. There have also been times where I've sat down at my computer and just written, kind of like journaling. And I know journaling is an important part of lots of people's day. I don't do it as often as I'd like to, but there have been times where I've just had to sit down in complete stream of consciousness with no no other goal other than to clear my mind and fight my way through what I'm feeling. Um, I do believe it's going to get better.
Yeah.
I do. And, I feel like now there might be a light at the end of the tunnel. And now I feel like I have something to fight for because, there possibly could be an end in sight, which is a huge load off just in and of itself.
Yep.
Um, but, it's something we've all never been through and it's new to navigate and we've just got to help each other through it.
Yeah, and recognizing that the physical health component is one thing, trying
Hmm.
to keep yourself safe from the cooties, that's
Yep.
one thing. But the mental health component that goes along with it, I found myself not only joining a gym, but also signing up for a trainer because there are
Yep.
weeks when my daughter's not with me. My trainer might be the only human being I have an actual conversation with
Yep.
in person that's not Zoom,
Yep. For
or
sure.
otherwise over the computer. I'm like, and I have introvert. I mean, I've got a strong introvert side.
Hmm.
Every
I
time,
get it.
oh, oh, this connection thing actually really matters.
It
It,
does. It
it,
really, it really doesn't. Honestly, it doesn't matter if you're only connecting with the drive-through guy at Dunkin' Donuts or at Starbucks. I mean, it's just literally that small amount of human interaction. Um, Everybody needs it. I mean, and stay-at-home moms have kind of been saying this like all along, like, "Hey, over here, look at
hey,
us,
hello.
help."
Yeah.
Um, or I should say stay-at-home parents, but I
Mhm.
mean, it's true. It has to be some interaction on your same level. It can't be just with your 3-year-old all day long. It doesn't serve us well. And then, of course, like you said, the working from home and everybody's doing Zoom, and it's not the same. I have a group of girlfriends that we try to go out to dinner once a month, and we obviously haven't done that since last February. And for a while, we Zoomed once a week, and then everybody got tired of Zooming, and it's just not the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
So while you have to put those things in place to give you something, and they can be fun, it's not the same. But I keep telling myself that it's also not forever.
Yep.
It's going to be about a year of our lives that's really upside down, and we can come out the other side.
Yep. Got to stay strong in the middle, and that's
For
where the
sure.
health aspect comes in, and making sure that you've got the support. Not only the toilet paper to make it through, but that you've got
Yep,
emotional support
for
that you need to
sure.
be able to come out through, strong on the other side as well. And that's it. It's just important not to lose sight of
Yep,
that and the relevance and the meaning
absolutely.
that plays.
And if there was ever a time, I mean, if you are a person that feels some kind of way about getting help or speaking to someone or having a therapist or going on medication or saying to someone, I'm struggling, of all the times, now is the easiest time to raise your hand and say, I need help.
Yeah.
I mean, now is the time to take advantage of what's out there. I recognize that there's privilege in saying that because there's also such a vast number of health disparities, and I'm talking about this as some people, a lot of people have lost their jobs and may not even have access to health insurance.
Mhm.
But there are some free resources out there. There are talk lines and there are text lines and there are telehealth and things like that. And if ever you've considered it but something has held you back, now is the time to get the help.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Um, Back to the things that make your soul sing. So the things that can maybe be the stressors that we've addressed, but then the things that make your soul sing. I know service, handbells. Um, Tell me about the difference in life and just what it feels like to light up from the
Yeah.
inside when you're engaging in the things that really bring you joy.
It's like a switch. It's like flipping a switch on.
Mhm.
And yet at the same time, as obvious as that seems, like you would think, okay, well then all the switch should be on all the time. And obviously if it makes you feel that good, you'll seek it out all the time. Um, but it's not really like that because life happens. And at first, if you don't get to do something you want to do or you don't get to focus on your passion, you're like, okay, take a little hiatus. It's okay. I'm going to get back to it. But then as life goes on, you may not get back to it.
Mm.
Once you do, it's only then do you realize how dull your life was without it. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, it is in my book, I kind of liken it to falling in love because, everybody says all the, common things about falling in love. Well, the grass is greener and the sky is bluer and the flowers smell better.
There's
And
butterflies.
right. It's like that. It's like, like when I have this in my life, when I have these opportunities to travel and to ring bells, to practice my conducting, to be with my people, as I said to my husband the last time I was gone, I texted him and I was like, these are my people. And it's just, it's so uplifting and it feels so fulfilling and it feels right. And it just puts, for me at least, it puts a much sunnier outlook on everything.
Yeah.
When I've been fulfilled in that way, I feel better about going home and parenting because I feel like I'm coming from a better place.
Mm.
I feel like I can focus on my work better because I've had the opportunity to do some fun stuff. And for me, it's also a matter of a left brain, right brain thing
Mhm.
because my work is in nonprofits, my work is, in writing. So there's creativity there, but music is a whole nother set of skills.
Yeah.
And it feels so good to use that part of my brain because growing up, I used it all the time. There was piano, there was flute, there was marching band, there was college symphonic band, there was pep band. I mean, it was constantly around me. And so now when I go back to it or I've been away from it for a little bit and I start to read the notes on the page and I think, oh my gosh, what does that mean again? Oh, right. That's what that means. It's just such a great use of my brain also. And it feels so good to exercise it in that way.
So are you telling me that when you do things that bring you joy, it makes you even better able to serve others from a positive, happy place?
Gee, I guess I am.
Oh, go figure. Go figure.
Someone might have written about that, I think.
Oh, thank you for being the example. But so often we spend, and I don't want to make gender bias around this at all, but we do tend to spend an awful lot of time, making sure everyone else's needs are met,
It's true.
and that whole selfless service idea. And if we're not filling ourselves up, it's a recipe for burnout,
It is. It
and
is.
idea of
Yeah.
service being a marathon and not a sprint. We have
Hmm.
to keep refueling, we just
Absolutely.
refueling. And it seems to me joy, I mean, self-care, but to me, doing the things that inspire joy is also an element of self-care, along with the massage
Oh, for sure.
and everything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
No doubt. I've kind of fallen in love with writing in the same way. And
I love that.
even though it's work to write a book, because I mean, obviously it is, it's something that I enjoy so much that I always feel better after I've done it for a while. I always feel better after I've rung bells for a while, or if I've studied music, or even if I've talked about it or like gotten with bell groupies and we get to do some sort of
Wild and
fun
crazy
thing.
kids.
Um, even if we just sit and reminisce and talk about, what it used to be like to ring in college and all of that kind of stuff. It's just I feel so much better.
Hmm. Yeah. I used to, when I was working on I went through a stint of writing screenplays. And so I remember the first one I was writing, and I would get up at like 4 in the morning to sit at the dining room table to write then because it was before anyone else was awake, before anybody needed a glass of milk or
Yep.
a trip to the bathroom
For
or
sure.
anything else. The dog was still asleep.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, even if this never goes anywhere, I've had so much joy just in the process.
Oh, for sure.
Process was worth it regardless
Hmm.
of destination. And finding those things and being willing to commit to those things,
Absolutely.
where the journey actually matters. It's
And
not.
I never expected that in writing.
Yeah.
I never expected when I sat down to write a book that I would get that much joy out of the process.
Mm.
I just figured, I would put my head down and work hard to the finish line, and then I would be, I'd be psyched to, I wrote a book. And then when my first book was published, it was a little bit of a letdown because I was like, well, this is awesome, but wow, I actually like really enjoyed doing the thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's been a really fun surprise and a really fun surprise passion that it's now become, part of my life. And, maybe there'll be more someday. But I just love it. I love it. But handbells is always there. That's my thing.
I love it. And that's fantastic. And that's another area where just knowing you and knowing how people can make a difference in your life, and
Mm.
your mentor in regards to handbells has made such a huge difference in your life and inspired you in so many ways. And I love
Amazing.
the story of the relationship you have with him. And it just goes to show that we make a difference in other people's lives in ways that we may never fully appreciate
Absolutely.
or understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The kind of interesting thing about that, I talked about God saying something to me about Nicaragua. I didn't get the same message with bells, but looking back, there was definitely a hand in what happened because I heard the handbells at Bucknell. I had I'd kind of sworn off handbells after I learned how to play them in middle school because it was an awful experience. And I was like, that is the dumbest instrument I've ever heard. I will never touch a handbell again. Like, seriously, who invented these things? And I went to college, and the story is just basically that my freshman year of college, I heard the Bucknell Ringers play at a church service, and I was just like, what? I was in shock. I didn't even know this instrument could do this or sound like this.
Hmm.
So the interesting thing about it is I went that whole year listening to them, and I knew the next year I wanted to audition, so I did. But when I showed up for that audition, there was a different conductor there than had been there the year before. It turns out the conductor that had been the year before when I heard them was in interim. And the actual conductor of this group was Dr. William Payne, and I had no idea who he was. It was completely serendipitous because he became such an influential part of my life. And I didn't even know that I was going to ring under his direction. Like I didn't even know anything about him. I walked in for my audition. I was like, well, that's not the same dude
Who the heck are
that
you?
was, but he looks a little intimidating. So yeah. And it just, there was a reason, whatever, however spiritually you believe in it, whether you believe in fate or things are planned out or whatever it is, for me, the hand of God was in all of that.
Love
Um, and to this day, I mean, the same guy played organ at my wedding, and he knows my children, and we played at their house, and it's just it's amazing. And what is also interesting is that that's such a common theme of handbells. Even though there's connection in music, say when you're playing in an orchestra or in a band, the connection in handbells between the people ringing and then the ringers and the conductor is so much more intimate and so much more connected because it's a different type of instrument to play. It's not like you're playing amongst several other people who are playing your same part. If you play trumpet, there are several other trumpets playing along with you. With handbells, it's not like that. Everybody has an individual part.
Oh, wow.
And so if you miss your individual part, you've essentially screwed up the entire song. So there's a lot of trust that has to be built. There's a lot of reliance on each other for help. And when you're when you're doing something like that, you end up connecting with all these people in a much more intimate way than you would if you were just sitting next to someone playing the flute or the trumpet and amongst multiple other people. So it's interesting that this has really all become about connection for me
Mm,
on such a deeper level than simply I enjoy the handbells. There's connection about it that's difficult to even explain.
mm. Thank you for making that connection. But I would not have thought of it in that way,
Yeah.
in terms of connection there. I have two more questions for you
Okay.
before we jump off. One, it's a question I ask basically everyone who, is brave enough to to come on the
Oh
show.
boy.
And that is, what do you believe when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to this wild
Hmm.
experience of life? What is it that you believe?
Um, I believe that God is out there. I believe in Jesus Christ.
Mhm,
I believe that he is what we should strive for as
mhm,
Christians, the way he would act, the what he would do, the example that he set.
mhm,
Um, it's interesting because I've, especially over my adult years, really grown through my faith, but also questioned a lot. And I think that's how I've grown, is because I've questioned a lot of things. And so as I've learned more, I've actually become less sure of what I know.
yeah,
And all that I think that I know for sure is that God is out there and he loves us and he tells us to love each other like we love ourselves.
mm,
And that's the basis of everything. And if we do that, everything else will fall into place. We don't need to do his job for him. We don't need to judge others. That's hard. It's human. I mean, we're still human. We're fallible, and he made us that way. Um, but if we just do that one thing, if we can just love other people, even when they piss us off, even when they are chanting for a political side we don't agree with, e- even if they are not wearing masks in the middle of COVID, and I would rather just say some words. we just we just have to love other people, and that's all we have to do, and he's going to take care of the rest. And I have mostly always gone to church. There have been times when I haven't. And even now in COVID, there are times when I haven't gone because I've been um, too zoomed out. I don't want to tune into another digital anything.
mhm,
Um, but to me, he's always there, and that's always there. I may sometimes get um, stymied or disappointed in organized religion or what people do or
mm,
what someone at church does. Um, and I think that's only normal because, again, we're people. We're here doing God's work, but we're people. We're going to screw up. And so, even when I have to pull back a little bit, I still try to do what I know how to do, and that's serve others. I mean, just this morning, I was at church helping to fluff our Christmas wreaths because when you bring them out of the attic and they're flat, you got to just pull those branches out. Um, and so even if I'm not involved in the way I was last year with Christmas services or something like that, I still find things that I can relate to and that I can do
mhm,
because my spirituality and my faith is bigger than my church.
mm. Okay. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Mhm.
And now for the last question. I know we've got this book, Head and Heart: How to Run a
Yeah.
Smart and Compassionate Nonprofit. Where can people find this and find you if they wanted to maybe talk to you about your nonprofit challenges or opportunities?
For sure. The book is available both through me personally and also on Amazon. Super easy. Click and order. If you want it through me, I'm happy to sign it for you. I have a website, hillarymarotta.com. And my email is just hillary@hillarymarotta.com. I love getting requests for books. I love to sign them to people and dedicate them and all that fun stuff. So, yeah, That's where you can get my book. That's where you can find me online. And soon on my website, there'll be more about my next book and more about playing handbells.
Perfect. When is there an expected like launch date for the next book? What do you
We
think?
haven't made an exact date yet, but we're hoping for I'm hoping for January.
Okay. Okay. So early next year.
Right. Yep. Early next year.
Fantastic. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
the conversation. I need this connection. So,
I know.
and I always enjoy the chance to talk with you. So thank you for sharing your
Same.
insights and your wisdom. For all of you listening or watching, thank you so much for being a part of our community as well. If you're listening on the podcast, please feel free to subscribe to the Dirt Road Divinity podcast, or on YouTube, subscribe to the channel so you can keep up to date with all the latest interviews and my random personal musings as well. So until next week, have a fantastic week, and thank you once again for watching Dirt Road Divinity.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'm gonna find my